Also, like, another thing I want to say is I don't, some people, I mean, not many, but the odd few people I've talked to over the months and years seem to think it's all a big rush, like game development, and it's about getting your project out there as fast as possible. It's like there's this like sort of stress surrounding it, and I think that mindset needs to change, because why is there a rush, right? Why does it have to be the case that a game has to come out as soon as possible? Why not see it as a sort of a life goal that you can achieve at some point in your life, and see it as a bigger thing? Because I know for me, I wouldn't get anywhere if I wanted to rush this project. If I was like, okay, Raindrop Chronicles has to be done by the time I'm 40, that would just be stressful. You'd be like a big race. It's about crafting it one step at a time, as anybody would do. Like any writer who's writing a saga or anything like that as well. They don't release the saga in overnight, right? It's a slow, steady process. And I don't work for anyone. I've got no publisher, no boss, so it's actually pretty relaxing, in all honesty. It's not stressful, because I've got nobody breathing down my neck being like, you got to release this next year, or you've got to release it. So it's actually the opposite. Like if I was working under someone, it'd be another story, because it'd be like, oh my goodness, there's a time scale for this, there's people that expect this out. But because it's all me in my own time and my own complete freedom, it's actually very freeing and fulfilling. Getting it out fast is the studio heads trying to appear. Exactly. So I'm not sure what the mindset is and what makes folk feel like, oh my goodness, game development's hard, and because I think it's a flawed perspective, and it's all about the mindset and how you see it. And I've never seen it that way. It just confuses me a bit when people do. I mean, of course, it's not an easy task. I'm definitely not saying, oh my, it's an easy thing. You definitely need so much passion to even do a project like this, but it's never something I've been stressed out by or complete and a lot of self-doubt over. I've got a lot of confidence in myself with it, but I'm not deluded in thinking it's something that's fast to do either. I see one step at a time as how I see it. I don't think any devs want to release a crappy game. No, of course not. And there are people who prefer to start off with a lot of small projects that fail fast and mindset. I respect it, but I think it's underappreciated that it isn't for everyone. Yeah, and the small project thing is it's definitely smart to do it that way. Start small, but I've always had like a sort of real drive to create a world and a big saga and characters and interconnected stories and all that thing, which you can't do with a small project. And it's the passion of creating that big thing that drives me really. But of course, it's a tough task, which is why it's cool to break it up episodically, so you see it as one milestone at a time rather than one massive thing at once. The government, hi Arthur, how are you doing? I think a lot of the pressure to rush people have is a financially motivated. Yeah, and that's another thing. I'm not driven by money, so I don't intend to be rich, or I'm not like, oh my god, this game needs to be released so I can have everybody's money. That's not why I do this. Like, if I wanted to get money, I'd just find another job that gave me a really good salary. So that's what I'd do then. Right? If you want to be rich, don't be an indie dev, because that might take a very long time to come, or never come even. I just entered the stream and the government, I know, just slap bang in the middle, the government, what a thing to walk in on, right? Because this is the next part of our world building, that's why this is there. But yeah, just see it as, no, it's actually not like that at all, because I don't have anyone I'm working under here. You know, if I had people like messaging me, emailing me like, Rose, Retro Chronicles, you better get it out this summer, or else. Now that would be completely different. I'd be stressed all the time, but that's all we good. Okay. So we got the Law Bible up here, and we actually will keep this article up because we'll probably need to refer to it. Here we go. So they're under NPCs, rulers and leaders. So let's get them up. The ones relevant to this are King Dollars and Prime Minister Trattoria, because they're the ones based in the capital and a part of the main government. Okay, so we'll have an overview of them in a sec, but at least we got them up. Hi, how's your game going? Hi, Joel, how are you doing? Not too bad. I mean, we're doing a lot of world building streams at the moment, and then we're going to sort of slide into story stuff, like present day story stuff, because I've got stuff going on here. I've got the house move coming up. We still don't have a date, but it's probably going to either be this month or next month. I'm going to be very likely painting the new house, because we might not be able to hire a painter in time because they might be busy, and we've also got a family that want to move into our house pretty badly right now, so we're sort of like, we gotta hurry up. So I'll be doing stuff, helping out, getting things done around the new house, like jobs and that. So of course it's not easy to actually get into like game development too heavily right now with the house move happening, but doing world building story stuff's pretty, you know, it's good, very chatty, and it's a really cool thing to focus on, and we can like develop our world in the meantime. Look at popularity Stardew Valley. That game was made by Bison, right? Bison, I don't know what they mean by that, but yes, that was a solo indie dev. Eric Concerned 8 is his name. 4 years took him to develop that game, and yes, he had a publisher, I believe, but they were pretty chill and very, very allowed him freedom, and he had full control of his game, I believe, from what I'm aware. Time for noms. Hope you have a good evening and stay safe until next time, hopefully. Yeah, take care, Robin. Thanks for hanging out. Yes, that is right, Rod, it is. I'm also working in an RPG in Unity, but in 3D, dark fantasy, realistic. Awesome. 3D is another thing altogether, that's for sure. Yes, I mean, people are probably not going to believe in me. That's normal. I'm not going to expect to win everybody over. I think that'd be asking a lot. But like, we have had 240 something, nearly 250 streams of doing this project now. I guess all I can say is, but hopefully by the time we've had 1,000 streams, people will start believing in me more. But I'm not doing this to get people's validation. Just because I stream it doesn't mean I'm after validation. I'm not looking for approval. This is just something I have fun doing, and I stream it because you kind of, have to build a community if you want your game to be successful. Which is difficult for me because I'm a humongous introvert by nature. But I've found doing this, like, it's very helpful to have community input anyway. It just makes the game stronger, having all the ideas on the table and bouncing off each other. So it's an experience I've found very valuable. But of course, I don't give a damn about what outsiders think, especially people who aren't really people that are regulars in the stream. If someone comes in, like a random person, and they're like, why aren't you making an MMO? Why aren't you making a 3D game? I'm just like, F off. Because that's happened before. Be like, why aren't you making a 3D game? Because I don't want it. That's the simple answer. I want to make what I want to make. Undertale is another example. Yeah, Toby Fox. Yeah, for sure. Like, gosh, there's so many solo indie devs, and yeah, only a small percentage of them become massively successful. But all those they're all have something in common. Those ones, they're all like very, very passionate, and they didn't give up and they carried on. Forgotten, you're sweet, bless you. Raindrop Chronicles will be the new Stardew Valley when it's released, I believe you as. Yeah, I'm under, like, I mean, I'm not, I don't expect anything. I'm not under any expectations regarding Raindrop Chronicles. I think you can set yourself for disappointment if you have too high expectations. But I do admit I have a lot of confidence in myself, and I very, very rarely get self-doubt. I'm not saying I don't get any, because it's human nature to have some kind of self-doubt now and again. It pops up, but I find that there's people out there, other creators, other people that I find get a lot more self-doubt than I have. So that's one thing in my favour. I don't struggle with that. I think if I did struggle with that, I don't think this would be tougher. I think having confidence in yourself can help massively. I would say best foundation is to have developed, published something before. Well, yeah, I suppose you'll get more public approval and belief if you've done that before. Common sense, really. But everyone has to start somewhere, right? And Manifold Garden, Friday, is that yeah, the 5 nights at Friday Night Freddy's, I think that stands for. I think so. Might have got the name wrong, but I think that's the name of the game. Alright, so finally let's get to it, shall we? I have a couple of notes on this, but we're going to sum up the things we know first. We're going to start super simple with what we know, guys. So if you're already in the stream right now, you've come at a good time, because we haven't got too deep into the nitty-gritty of the government yet. We're going to do that now. I mean, just throw ideas about. I probably won't use bullet points and that because it can get messy. I'll just write paragraphs. Of course, you need to start as everybody did before. Make a guess, so hard, enough passion, you do it for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's better to not think of it as so hard, because that can consume somebody. If your mind is like, this is so hard, like, I don't think of it like that. I try, you sort of just do it. You just, it's everything's hard, right? Whatever you do in life, nothing comes easy, especially enough something that's worth it. My previous project took me 5 years. Well, this will take me a lot longer than that, I'll tell you that. And it doesn't daunt me. because I've got to see this as like it's not a race. Excited for your RPG again. Thank you, Pistol. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's not a race for me at all. I'd rather like take my time and it be good at the end rather than be like, okay, let's go 5 years and who cares what it's like. As long as it's happened 5 years. Nope. I don't want to say this because then people will start thinking, oh my god, she'll never release the game. But I do sort of see myself as sort of a George R.R. Martin, which is bad to say because he's never released his books. But do you get what I'm saying? Like the whole it's not about rushing. It's about releasing each part of the series in your own time. And when you're ready and when you think it's right to release and when you're happy with it. Even if that means I'm an old lady by the time this is done, like, so what? As long as I'm on my deathbed and I'm like, I did it, I did something epic, I'll be happy. I mean, I'd like to be younger than an old lady, of course, but I'm not going to punish myself if this ends up taking longer than I thought. What engine are you using? RPG Maker? I mean, RPG Makers, I think it's pretty clear that one person can make a game in RPG Maker. It's no Unity or nothing that's like completely ambitious. I mean, I'm definitely stretching the engine as far as it can go, that's for sure. But many people have created, many solos have created a game in RPG Maker. I would never touch Unity and Unreal. I'd be absolutely nuts if I did that. That would be punching above my weight. I do know my limits. It's about knowing your limits and what you can do. Be asking a lot because there'd be a deep learning curve and with everything else with the game. Okay, so I found a really cool article, folks, about governments. 36 types of government it talks about, and it lists, I mean, this will be cool. Anyone who's got an interest in world building in general in the stream right now, this might be something you'd want to look at as well if you're curious, because it literally lists every type of government you can get, and inspired by real history and things as well. And there's some like very obvious ones in here, like democracy's at the top, of course, but this one starts getting a little bit unusual with its type of governments, which is very interesting as well, and can put a spin on like the typical way of ruling. So I'd say, I mean, if you're curious, I'd say it's worth looking through this, because we're going to be looking through this today. I've already looked through it, and there's definitely one in mind that struck me for the one that ours could be, because we only know, the one thing we do know about their government we have so far is that we've got two people. Well, King Dolos and Prime Minister Oreo. What? Why is the formatting weird? There we go. No. Okay, there we go. That will do. These characters were set in stone a very long time ago. Actually, they're community characters. So any community character is like somebody that's a regular in the stream can add to the game and sort of flesh out themselves. And these two were created a while ago, so they've existed for some time. and their stories flow into each other quite nicely. Like, obviously, as time goes on in regards to community submit characters, we might have to I might have to start limiting the form in regards to how fleshed out they can be, because it'll start to become harder to make characters that the community fit with our lore and world over time. Especially as we start setting this in stone and it starts becoming more established, which it is. In the first year of this project, no world building was set in stone, so it allowed the community to be pretty flexible in what they could have as the lore. But of course, naturally, the forms might have to become a little bit less fleshed out over time. But I'd still love to have the option for you guys to submit characters, because I think it's awesome. We'd be able to do that, even if it means only deciding their appearance and a few other key details. And could you link the article? Yeah, I'll pop it in chat for you. There you go, Matt. And I think that it links to part 2 at the bottom as well. I think they link to they should link to each other, I assume. The retro art style definitely suits not having a deadline, since it won't look dated or have to be updated to keep up with changing technologies. Yeah, I mean, yeah, for sure. And it definitely makes it a little bit less overwhelming working in 2D. Like, it's a lot to a 3D thing. If that's someone's specialism, I don't blame them for wanting to pursue a 3D project. But when someone comes up in stream and is like, why don't you do a 3D game? It's kind of like, I absolutely know nothing about 3D. I've never even learned it. My skill set is 2D and everything I'm doing with this project, right? So you do what you're comfortable with. If someone's comfortable with 3D, do 3D, and if someone's comfortable with 2D, do 2D, right? Okay, so we have these 2 characters. So it's pretty clear looking at this, even if we just briefly look through their profiles, that this guy, the Prime Minister, has control over the king. So, as established here, the monarchy were formed first and the government came over 100 years after that. And obviously it wasn't those two in power then, because it was well before they was born. But the monarchy is kind of the established government, and the governments come after that. And I think we all know that in most fantasy stories, it's usually a monarchy that's like from ancestry, like birthright, and that's usually how it is. But with what we're establishing, especially in regards to our lore last week, and the backstory of the different races and things, ours could be more unique than that. I can't see King Dolos being king from birthright, because it clashes against the law we've got. Humans, for a start, weren't here first. They weren't the first race on Earth, and they are who are in rule. King Dolos is a human, and so is Trattoria. But looking through all this list, it can get some ideas for other types of monarchies and governments that they could be. It doesn't necessarily have to be one in power because of they were the son of a previous king, and that you can take a unique kind of government where people are elected or chosen through different things. So right, so I think the one I noticed was on the second page, so let's find it. This was the one that intrigued me. We could put our own spin on it to make it relevant to what we're building. But the government where the talented and the skilled find themselves in positions of authority. Which was interesting because, right, if King Dolos isn't in power from birthright, or class, race, magic ability, then other things that could be a thing instead are things like talent and skill, like King Dolos being good at something and he ended up in power from his talent in a certain skill. And now that skill that Dolos is talented in might not be politics. He's probably a not very good politician, and I'd say he's not, because, well, he's apathetic and Totalitarian has sort of manipulated him and taken control. So I'm thinking that he's a poor politician. And he found himself as king but didn't really want to be. I know that's kind of a common trope. And Totalitarian coming and actually having a better knowledge in that is perfect for him, because he's not very good at it anyway. Now, I mean, we did have a little discussion about this character last stream, and we kind of thought, is he a full-on dictator, or is it a lot more is it a fake democracy or something similar to a fake democracy? Because his name's Totalitarian, which certainly spells out bad guy, but what makes that funny and amusing, that name, is that people don't realise he's a traitor, and they're sort of blind to it, and they think he's this charismatic leader who's absolutely fine, but he's been sneaky behind the scenes. And that's probably how I vision it right now. Someone who's been very sneaky behind the scenes and up to no good, but yet the people think he's probably great. He might have a few people who question him, no doubt, but overall the masses probably think he's fine, and Dolos certainly thinks he's fine, because he's let him have a say in a lot of things. If it's hereditary, then that might help explain why humans are in power if they descend from political intermarriage of royalty over the generations. Yeah, I mean, it's not impossible for us to go the route if we wish, like with the hereditary, if we have a think, and there's probably a way around it. But part of me kind of wants to put a spin on the typical fantasy that we used to, where it's commonly that. And that's why I kind of want to just broaden our options a bit and think about other reasons why King Dolos might be in power that isn't just from birthright or anything like that. And he could have saved the last ruler's life by happenstance, maybe. Yeah, I mean, we haven't thought of the previous kings yet, but it's going to be cool to sort of develop their sort of timeline of who ruled before as well at some point. It's probably easier to think of the present day right now, but I can see us sort of getting into the past ones before. So we'll just get in a few details that we 100% know right now, and we can sort of speculate on options and where we can go after that. So what we do know likely a poor politician because he's let someone else take control. Someone who was very capable wouldn't have let Prime Minister Toro take up all the duties and end up having all the power over them. So that's likely. But I mean, I think because we're giving him a negative quality here, it'd be really good to balance it out with a positive quality as well, and the reason he became king in the first place. But his positive quality is probably not the politics side of things. It's another talent or something else he's done that's made him admired by people. Because unfortunately, good skills, good talent, birthright, being a good fighter, being a good scientist, or being a good craftsman doesn't equal good politician, right? So that's kind of the flaw with the technocracy type of government. Because no, I mean, you can. It's admirable. You think, yeah, fair enough. If they're good, if that, then it should be it. But it doesn't mean that they're going to be the best. It's the same as birthright. Just because you're born into it doesn't mean you're going to be any good either. And of course, it's good to not have it be exactly perfect, because if the government was already perfect, then there wouldn't be a story that would need to be told. So we purposely want to make a flawed government here that's definitely dodgy stuff going on behind the scenes. If it's skill-based, someone needs to decide what the support skill is. Now, I had an idea of this because there was a talk recently where I think I mentioned it a little bit last stream, but not too much, where it was discussed that the arts and crafts would be sort of admired in this world, unlike our world. Like in our world, right, let's real talk here. Artists don't get in the modern world, artists don't get the respect they deserve. They're underpaid and people sort of expect them to do work for free. I thought it'd be quite wholesome and really cool to see in this world artists actually, and craftsmen as well, and anyone in a sort of creative line of work as the richest of society and the ones that people are like wow about and they're really respected. And that would fall nicely with Nigel Buckington's arc in Lakefall as an aspiring painter who, you know, might want to create a better life for himself. And he's sort of, we briefly discussed that Nigel Buckington, who lives in Lakefall, paints very casually, but it could be that there's a larger ambition deep down for him to be better. And same for Duncan, who's the crafts person, weapons master of Lakefall. They're probably not very good, but it's kind of something people strive towards. So because of that, the idea of Dallas being some kind of sculptor, like craftsperson makes statues or something that's in a creative line, was kind of interesting. And if he was like an artist or a crafter like that it would make him fall under the talented category of ruled by the skill. But of course it's nothing to do with politics, which would fit because he is a poor politician, right? I mean, we could always go the fighter route where, he saved someone's life and he did something admirable in battle, but to me that's kind of a little bit typical. I'm kind of thinking going more of a, because you don't really hear that, well, I haven't heard it, correct me if I'm wrong folks, but you never really hear of a king or a government leader that's a creative person. Very often it's mainly they're either a warrior who is brilliant in battle but terrible at politics, a bit like Robert Baratheon from Game of Thrones. He was a terrible politician, a bit like Dallas, but that's because he was a good fighter and he got his way to the throne because he fought his way to the throne and succeeded, which is a very common trope, isn't it? great warrior gets the throne but doesn't have a clue when it comes to politics. So I'm kind of reluctant to go down that route, although it's very appealing because that's kind of how it often is. But I kind of want to purposely try and avoid going down the typical tropes and putting in a unique spin on your traditional king or your traditional typical ruler, and maybe sort of surprise people and be like, actually that's unusual, I wouldn't have expected someone like that to have got the throne. So I kind of want to just broaden our options there of the skill set he could fall under there. And because we talked about it a bit last stream about the whole art being respected, and maybe that the rich people are artists in the world, and it all links in with the god, the kit god who built a safe haven, who wanted to inspire passions and creativity. That could have made a lot of talent flourish when he made that safe haven, which is on here, folks. If peeps want to look at the Pantheon, it is in the Ideas discussion channel, and we did develop that character a little bit last stream, this one particular legend here. But basically they wanted, their great deed was they built a safe haven and place of escapism for people during a time of war. We don't know what this time of war was just yet because it's underdeveloped, but it allowed people to sort of grow their skill sets and passions and escape and not waste their lives needlessly to being killed in battle. Sort of waste of life. And a lot of people could have looked on that as a sort of crime and offence, like because betraying duty to do that, but it was an interesting sort of potential story arc for a person that lived in those times. So there's a definite theme because of this. There's a definite theme that's forming of respect for creativity and following creativity, following passions and dreams. So it could fit to kind of follow and parallel that with King Dolos and any kind of, with the whole big skill at something and be in power. And although we did say that this would have happened at the other side of the world and not in the capital, that was many years ago, and maybe now that's kind of influenced people within the capital. But it's all very admirable, that's the thing, and I think that's the interesting thing, because Prime Minister Totalitarian is trying to shake that up. He's sort of ruining that. He's coming in and sort of manipulating his way into power when it's probably quite nice how it is currently. It doesn't mean it's perfect, it's still flawed because you're putting in people who can't really rule that well, and people are getting taken advantage by people like this because of that. But it's an interesting starting point, I think, so I wanted to bring it up because it's a bit different, and I wanted to see if there was a potential way it could tie into the government and how it is. But let's catch up with chat first and see what you say. And this would be the time to reference that rules for the rulers video I linked once. Oh yeah, and maybe the current government of artist kings arose from an agreement between two major cities, since the other one focuses on art so much. Yeah, well, the other one definitely its origins would have begun as an art city, and that could have further made that flourish with its tech and things like that, and industry, but it's sort of lost its way in the present day, hasn't it? It's become more of a crime scene and a little bit more of an anarchy, and it's sort of lost its way because it's going to be more gritty than a flourishing city now, that one in the west. But and it's kind of interesting then to see that the capital's actually taken on some of what made that city special once over the years and centuries, because I'm assuming it would have happened, well, we've got between 600 and 6,000 years here for each of these. I'm assuming this is going to be more of a recent one, like the 600, 800 years ago mark, but who knows, because the kit were around So I'm definitely, I'm trying to, of course, an important thing with world building, I feel, is to make sure themes link and you're not accidentally making things be disconnected from each other, because really it's about making a solid themes to follow and parallels most of all, because it's very easy to get carried away with world building, and before you know it, all your cool ideas have absolutely no link to each other and it's all very random. So I'm purposely sort of trying to link current characters and future characters and any NPC that we have in with the themes that we're building around this pantheon of 6 people. And I think that'll keep a solid, consistent structure, and we get to like really, really go into depth and detail on those themes and write really cool stories about each of them, rather than spread ourselves too thin. And I don't know if any of these gods are war focused. Maybe Haladar is quite war focused in a magic sort of way, with their sacrifice and bravery and courage, so maybe them. But the others, this one's more about wisdom and knowledge. This one's more about equality and fairness and freedom. This one's more about gratitude and humility and love and kindness, and this one's more about sort of inventions and science and salvation and cleanliness and modesty. So they all each stand for different things, but this one, so originally I had no idea that this one could be a link to King Dolus or the government in general, but as I was reading through the list, I was kind of thinking, it'd be cool to actually go for one that wasn't a king just because he was born into it, because that's typical. And I kind of purposely wanted to kind of put a spin on the traditional king and queen and princess thing. And also the interesting thing about that, like if we went for a king that was in just not from birthright, that means they wouldn't have like a family that we're going to take over after, and it's not about them having sons and daughters and this big line of family tree that will follow after. So chances are he's just on his own, King Dolus, which makes him an easier, more vulnerable to Traitoria, because he's kind of completely on his own here to be manipulated. He doesn't have a son or a queen to sort of guide him and be like, watch out for that Traitoria. He's like being taken in. He's probably, another reason it could work as well is because if he's busy with his statues or sculpting, he's probably going to be far too busy crafting than paying attention to what Traitoria is doing. Like that, he'd probably be in his room just crafting all day. Just that's what matters to him, not doing government stuff. It's probably boring to him. And that's perfect for Traitoria, because he can do what he's kind of secretly being the king in relay, but he's just letting him do it all. If he worked for the last ruler, he might have gained their admiration that way, making a mural or a statue. Maybe that could work, because it's sort of thinking each king, if that's sort of the rule and how things are, you are sort of elected, or one person elected. It might not be a democracy where you're elected by the people, but even if one person or a small group elected them, they'd probably have to have something admirable, some sort of skill set that makes them worthy. Maybe King Dolus is the world's best sculptor, and he did a really amazing sculptor that made him get that role eventually. Maybe that could work. He sculpted the previous king, and it was just so shockingly good that they couldn't say no. But yeah, that's an idea. It's good to have a starting point. And something came to my head then, but I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, it's also thinking about when was it decided that people would be elected from their talent or become king from their talent, because it might have not been like that once upon a time. Like in the early age, in the age of the first men, for example, maybe someone made that possible, that you become king not from your birth but from who you are, but from what you've done. Because that's quite an admirable quote, like something like let me find a similar quote to what I'm trying to say, because I don't know which one. I mean, we've got two legends here. We've got the justice one and we've got the humanity one, and we did say this one would be in the Highland Zone, their statue, the Walker legend. It wouldn't be impossible to make this legend be the one that sent that message that they are the ones to be king, the one who achieves something grand and has a great talent. They're the king, not the one who's born into power, because then it's sort of like there's a law in place, right? They have to follow the law and the scriptures of the Walker god for how the governments run. They can't just do as they please, the kings and queens. They can't be like, okay, I can do what I want now. They still have to follow the way of the Walker and go by their morals. And I think that could connect. Looking at what they stand for, it wouldn't be impossible to sort of see that they believed that everybody, people who succeed and get an achievement are the ones that deserve it, not the people who are born into power. So that's just a starting point. It's very rough, but it'd be cool to link it into a legend, even, because a lot of governments they follow like some kind of law. It's not like, unless they're a dictatorship and can do as they please. And I mean, this one definitely has a sort of fairness about them as well, but because they're of the reptile race, it feels like they're not related to what's going on in the capital. But maybe these two can come hand in hand, because I feel like this one stands for fairness of an equality of race, and this one stands for fairness and equality of class, and like the level of where you are in society in regards to what you can do. So I feel like these two legends definitely have a lot in common, but just in different ways, perhaps. And I guess I've got to read the rest of what you've said, because there's definitely some stuff there, but I've just read the most recent thing you've said, Met, and I think, yeah, making water so crucial to the central government's history sounds good. They aren't well represented yet, because I'm realising out of all the pantheon we've done, we've not really talked very much about the Walker, and we did say last stream that they are going to be the Highlands god. They're going to be the one based in the capital, and so naturally it fits for it to be them. And we were sort of going down a humanity route where, you know, people, they're definitely honourable, this legend. They care about the people, that's pretty clear. So we can shape what we've built, like these traits that we've listed here, with someone has decided this system of who's going to be a leader. Like this person somehow has been able to decide the system, because they're obviously a respected person in history, and because they're part of the pantheon and the religion, people are going to respect that and pay attention to it, and they're going to follow the law of that Walker. because they'll fear that they'll get bad karma or something if they don't, a lot of people. Because some of them here are religious focused governments. I can't find it now because there's so many, but there was one that was literally all about someone's a king because God demanded it. That's another type of government. So in a way, we sort of could go that way as well, where they've demanded it in a way that those who are skilled and talented become king or queen. And because of that, that's why they're following that system now. And maybe it wasn't like that before. Maybe before this Walker god was born and had their great deed and sent this message, maybe it was different, and maybe people were in power from other things, like more barbaric things and very outdated concepts. And this Walker came along and wanted to change things and thought, this isn't right. People shouldn't be king or a ruler because of this. They should be ruler because of, a more honourable thing. And it kind of makes the government look quite nice on the surface, doesn't it? If it's like that, very honourable deep down, but definitely still flawed. Because it still doesn't mean that we're going to have the best politician ruling just because they're really talented at art, or really talented at sculpting or science or some kind of craft. They could still be terrible, and that's kind of what is happening. Dulles, all he probably wants to do is sculpt all day. That's all he wants to do in his life. He never wanted to be king, really. I suppose he's got here while he comes across as selfish. Yeah, because he's selfish because he's really into his art, right? We could see it from that perspective. And he has a collection no one knows about that I must complete. Could be related to his sculpture collection. And although, we can always shape these what's filled in on the bio if necessary with our law to make it fit, it's cool to have something to sort of go off. And now let me read what Met said again. So if the war was when the current monarchy formed, the Western city could have gone, I will join and pay taxes without a war. If you promise to make sure your king is an icon of good artistry. Interesting. Yes, and I mean, you say the Western city could say that, and I think it definitely works. And although we're sort of talking about the Walker having a big say on this, there's nothing wrong with making the Walker legend link with the kit god as well and have some sort of connection, because although there could have been for a different time, I think linking the pantheon so some of them who lived during the same age knew or admired the other is a cool way to go as well, rather than making them all completely disconnected, in a way that we did with these two, the two that lived in the age of gods. One of them cured the plague and the other raised the city to stop the spreading of the plague. So although they did two very different great deeds during that time, the two deeds were linked to each other, so it gives the two of them a connection. And totally not against if we wanted to making a connection between the three that lived in the age of the first men. It's kind of appealing to make them all live in different centuries and different times and have no link, so that we can spread them equally throughout history. But if it works, we could even make all three of them have lived at the exact same time if we wanted, if it works better for the law. If we want, maybe when the kit moved to the urban city, the Walker lived in the capital while all that was going on, and the Walker sort of shared the ideals of the kit, or something. Just a thought, because it seems like there's a definite connection if we want to. There's a definite connection with the Safe Haven, because that was what inspired creativity in the first place. So really, Dulles wouldn't be the craftsman he is if that safe haven never existed. It probably definitely influenced a lot of the future generations. And it's nice to slot that in with someone who is in a position of great power right now, because it's kind of showing that it's made a difference, and people who did this and followed their passions are now better for it. In a way. I mean, his life isn't that great. He probably, like we say, hates being king, but he's still got a lot of say if he wanted to. He's a powerful man. And Technocracy is an interesting system to examine. The initial vision for Technocracy involved replacing regular money with a system where everything costs the amount of fuel that goes into making it, and then everyone just has energy stipend each week. Making Walker so crucial to the central government's history sounds good, yeah. Like the Pope. Yeah, when we were talking about the religion one, I think that the Pope was mentioned as a reference actually to that. If you guys look through this, if you want, I'll pop it in chat again. That you might find it, but it might be on the page one. I'm not sure. There's a lot to read here, but it's pretty fascinating to look through all these different ones. That's for sure. It can really broaden the different types of governments, because it's so easy to just have a typical typical monarchy where you're born into power, or just a dictatorship. Like, they seem to be the default ones, with the most common. And the dictatorship one, of course, it's very appealing because it can create the conflict and overthrowing the government, and that's what the heroes do, right? They want to throw the bad government down, so I can see why it's a common trope, but sometimes I like it being more subtle than that as well. Like, everything's nice or seems nice on the surface, at least in the beginning, but it's not actually like that, really. Totalitarian is probably a bit more sneaky than that. Alright, so where were we? Of course, dogs are technically in charge, but humans took over by being so good at head pats, really based on who gets born soonest after the previous ruler's star appears. I'll have to read what you've said more properly off stream, Met, as well, because there's a lot of interesting stuff there, and I want to make sure I've fully understood it as well, because you know me on stream, sometimes things go over my head quite easily because my brain can't process everything, but I'll make sure to read it all. And yes, and this does open up the opportunity, like, it opens up the rulers not being limited to race either. Like, it's not like, oh, it has to just be humans that are the government throughout whole of history. Not necessarily. Maybe the previous king could have been of another race, and it just so happens that the current king is human right now because he just fit the criteria. He was the world's most famous sculptor and a really admired, almost public figure and pop culture icon even, that people just was like, you've got to give it to King Dolos, you've got to give it to him. Like, people just overly respect him almost blindly, perhaps, who knows, but that can be dangerous in itself if someone's too respected, because they might not be all they seem. But we don't know. We haven't discussed who elects them yet. We don't. Is this going to be a government where only one person or a small group decide that King Dolos was king? Or is it like a vote among the people? That's another thing up for consideration. But one thing I think we do know is that the scriptures and the laws state that whoever becomes king or queen has to have like a sort of skill, a great skill, or I guess it's thinking about how that can be worded. That's another question. So I'm going to, I want to find the quote, a good quote that sort of fits with our the moral message behind this Walker. and what they wanted and what they sort of visioned. I mean, this is a mix. Like, we're going for the Walker, but I'm definitely seeing parallels with the Justice one with going for the equality, because it's like, it's almost like the message is it's everyone is equal. It doesn't matter. It's what you are is not decided by your birth, but what you have achieved, or something along those lines could be what the law states. And if we felt it was fair, we could have made these two work together as a double team, where if we feel there's a lot in common with what the draft says. I mean, it seems a bit not linked right now because it's a human in power and it's not a draft king, so it seems like very, very unlinked. But like we say, the government doesn't necessarily have to be limited to just humans. There could have been a draft king in the past who was skilled. If we want, the options there, if we did want that. Because, like, if we say something like this, so it's like throwing the typical "you a king from birthright" trope on its head, right? That's basically what we're trying to do here. Something like that. What you are is not decided by your birth, but by what you achieve. And I mean, the equality thing could fit with that, but if we do bring in the equality thing, it's immediately bringing the draw god into the limelight, which right now, if we want to keep the draw separate from this way of life and just purely focus on the Walker, we can totally do that. But I just want to bring up the thought of we could always go by the laws of the two legends if there's a fit and we feel like there's a lot of draw moral foundations in this message too. It's up to us. I can see both. I can see both the Walker and draw in the sort of message we're going for here, but because I don't want to completely ignore the draw because they haven't really been developed yet either, and they've clearly had an influence in some way too. I know we've placed them in the desert zone because we feel that the desert's going to be highly populated with draw. So, and that's very, very much works. I think keep their monument in the desert. I think they should have a lot of their followers in the desert, draw who respect them. But it's also a good idea as well to think how they might have linked to other things as well, and not just limit to where we could take that character either and that legend. Those were two different statements. The one was a joke and the other one was the previous government. Yeah. No worries, Matt. For sure. And maybe instead of an election, there could be an art competition, how to determine the next leader. That sounds pretty creative, because I'm definitely for going for something a little bit less typical in regards to how people are elected as well. Or, I mean, what Met says is interesting as well, ruling based on who gets born soonest after the previous ruler's stars appears. So it's whatever we feel is going to work best. But I'll keep the options open for now. And we'll have a think about it and we'll see which fits with the narrative best as we chat about it. And maybe people of a given government level choose the next level up. So the public chooses mayors, the mayors choose governors, the governors choose dukes, and the dukes choose kings. Yeah, so I mean, it depends how much we want to expand the government, how many branches and the hierarchy of it is, because I do like the idea of King Dollars being isolated and on his own, so Trattorio can sort of manipulate him easier. But it could also be interesting if Trattorio has to get through others as well, like other ranks of people, and manipulate them too. I definitely don't think it's going to just be Dollars and Trattorio in the government. I can see there definitely being people like lackeys of Trattorio that are government scientists, and people who are head of the military and things like that. But as for people in the palace, the castle itself, where Dolos is doing all his paintings, it's also something to consider of who his family are here, because his family have no power. They're not going to follow on. There's no birthright. If he does have a son, they're not going to be king after. So his family are kind of irrelevant, really, because when he passes on, or it will just be someone else elected for their skill, someone with no link to Dolos and who his connections and his court and families were and that. But, you know, obviously there'd be people who'd have to serve him, and being got completely on his own might be a little bit unrealistic. But the more people there are around him, the harder it is for Trattorio to get his way with Dollars, because it's thinking, of course, how on earth was Trattorio able to get the power he did in the first place? I mean, the government was already established a long time ago, looking at our timeline, so they always probably had some form of power, but probably less power. But maybe their power grew over time, especially as they started making discoveries like this and setting things in stone in the world. And this was before Trattorio was born. So it's probably more that Trattorio he manipulated Dolos, and he became prime minister because he was trusted by Dolos. Maybe Dolos can appoint the prime minister. Maybe whoever's king can appoint the prime minister. Maybe that's how it works here. Because looking at the profile, this is what we have. While travelling through these lands, I met the apathetic King Dolos, and he offered me lodging in exchange for my service as a fortune teller. Seeing the king's ineptitude, I steadily leveraged my position higher to better help all those across the realm. Years went by, and I am now Prime Minister of the kingdom, overseeing the day-to-day business ruling, so His Majesty may focus on more important affairs, which his important affairs are literally just doing his art. So you're right. But I think Trattorio is going to have more of a say, and he wants to have more of a say. And he weren't even Prime Minister originally, he was just a random fortune teller. But he obviously needed to get in with Dolos to get noticed, and he leveraged himself to Prime Minister after that. And, well, I figured the star thing would only work until new stars stopped appearing, so then they'd be forced to change it at that point. Yeah, that's very true. So looking at when the star stopped, that was like over 100 years ago. And that would have been before both Dolos and Trattorio were born. So, in regard, yeah, now you said that makes sense. I'm realising that myself now. So nowadays, things, yes, are done a bit differently. And I think something that Sayonara said is a little bit quirky, right? It's a bit unusual and a little bit silly. That people are elected based from an art competition, and it's almost so silly and quirky that I want to go with it. it could work. Like he sculpted something and it was just so magnificent that, yeah, he became the king. So we could totally go down that route. But yes, if thinking about other people who live in the castle as well and how they could fit in is something we shouldn't ignore either, potentially. But I can't think of any like place for them in the story right now, and how they could have a greatly affect Dolos or Trattoria's character arcs if we were to have others living in the castle with Dolos. But, you know, we'll leave it open in case we're like, oh yeah, it'd be really cool to have, you know, a duke or a governor or some kind of someone that serves under Dolos even, because like there could be a sort of person in the way of Trattoria getting what he wants even. So we'll say King Dolos is... Oh, let's title this as Walker Legend. I mean, looking at the Walker, we've got all these traits. Not all of them immediately connect with what we're building, like things like the love and kindness is like forgiveness feels like a completely separate thing to let skilled people have power. But they could have stood for other things too, and it could also carry over to kings should treat their citizens with love and kindness as well. Like it's not like the scripture's gonna only have that in it. There's gonna be so much law that there is to follow on what makes you a good king, and it could be based on each of those in a different way. I think leaders should be picked based on who has the most scales. Hi Rex, how you doing? Welcome. You would say that because you have scales. But at some point it would be cool to think of the draw legend and how they could potentially tie in, because there is a lot of connections as well with the whole equality thing and leadership and some of the traits the draw has with how the government is here. And I know that we sort of have built the draw as outsiders and oppressed, and they'll all either just live in the desert or Everblue and Forest and don't have a say with what goes on in the capital. So if we still want to go with that, which makes sense because it might be weird to suddenly make the draw a thing in the capital, then we can keep that draw in the desert and what they stand for and what they do and what they've achieved a separate kind of theme and story to the desert region. But we can still do parallels with this in a different way, because I still see it as the Walker's more about social class differences, and the draw legend is more about racial differences and equality in regards to that. So they're both about fairness, but in different ways, perhaps. And maybe the Walk saw the art contest a way to show your kindness by expressing a positive message in the art. Yeah. So yeah, we can totally filter in these what they represent and all these traits in with the message as well. And it's all about, you know, it would fit to like have it as, you know, whoever's the king has to have all these good qualities: humility, loyalty, and kindness, forgiveness, and all these qualities are very admirable things to want the ruler to have. So it's this legend is really shaping the future of rulers into something that the people would love. I could see many people backing this idea when it came about. So it's going to work. I think that's going to work as the Walkers' great deed. They were the one that created the new government, as in changed the government for the better from being barbaric and unequal and just totally unfair. I mean, let's just have a quick think about time period here, because we know that they lived in the age of first men. They had to have lived in the age of first men, because it's not possible to be a god after the age of the fading stars, because the stars stopped. So they had to have lived. I mean, how old Dolos and Trattorio wouldn't be that young, but they're clearly, you know, they've lived in the fading stars generation. They wouldn't have been born in this area. They'd be long dead, especially being humans. They can only live till 80 years old at most. So they definitely would have put this law in place many years before. So that means we've probably had a few rulers that have been skilled in art before Dolos. So this has been set in stone for probably at least 200 years. Because we can have them be in the Age of Kings. I know we said Age of First Men, but it's possible to have this Walker legend in the Age of Kings, because it was before the Age of Fading Stars, right? So we can do that if we want, and it might be a better fit because that's when everything came about, to have them be a one from there. So we might want to change it to that, which means the kit wouldn't be the most recent if that's the case, but you don't need them to be the most recent. Because the kit definitely feels to me like somebody that would have lived during a time of when these civilizations were about, when war was really bad. I think that things got better in regards to war in the Age of Kings. I think that's probably was when things became more civilized and more calm. But there might have been a bit of unfairness in the beginning, and the Walker noticed and started change. How they would have had such influence to change it to such a degree is another question, especially with them being a Walker. What gave them, what was it about them that made the change? Why was it people listened and realised this change needed to happen? That's another thing as well, because the thing is, it probably started in this period here, the year 300, which was over 400 years ago, right? Because we're in the year 134 now. It might have started as being from birthright back then, in the beginning. Maybe it was a fae king. Because that's another thing, folks. Now that's come to my mind. Let's not forget that we have a monarchy in the Cloud City too, in the present day. The character is Scaly says she's an exiled fairy from this land. That's why we create this place in the first place, because we knew of her character bio backstory, that she came from an exiled city far away that was populated by fae. And she said she's the exiled daughter of a fae king. So maybe they moved here when they were overthrown. and they are a monarchy that is still pretty much like your traditional one. It's all just fae who are like follow on, and your typical birth carry on because you're the son of that king, etc, etc. It's very much could be like that, I think, because they seem a bit wary of outsiders if they've exiled her character. I mean, let's remind ourselves what her profile said, because I know we're talking more about the capital at the moment and the government that exists within the capital, because that's our focus, because it's more relevant to the point in the plot we're working on. But it's totally a cool thing to remember and consider the rulers in the other cities too. So, part of a group of fairy outcasts, and I'm secretly the daughter of a fairy king in a faraway land, but I was cast out for being too friendly to outsiders. So yeah, that gives me a real feeling of your typical monarchy, where you have your more traditional king and queen. So maybe that was a thing. I think that's definitely something to consider, that maybe once was, maybe, I mean, we know that the city existed, don't we, because of how Haladar raised the city, but it could have been a very different place then. There might have not been any kings and queens in the Cloud City back then. It could have just been fae and elves living in harmony, and there not being any rule, because it was probably a bit of a utopia. And when we see this, the monarchy forms, it's kind of like a big question mark of who was ever the first king. And when we look at this, it all came from the age of first men. The first civilization rise and fell, the second civilization rise and fell. Humans were very new at this point, so they probably wouldn't have had much influence at that time. And I'd say elves and fae definitely, when it comes to privilege and power, they definitely could be there first. But I don't think the fae and elves are like bloodthirsty or anything like that. I don't know if it'd be quite in their nature to a great degree. I imagine their harmonious nature would have probably made them be happy to just leave and be isolated elsewhere, but I don't know. That's just some thoughts. Something could have gone wrong, and they could have had the odd fae leader that was a bit of a dictator as well. But the fae themselves might have not liked that deep down. Who knows? I'm rambling, just random thoughts. And thank you. I think we had a host or something. Just didn't see who it was that popped up. Thank you very much. So King Darcy would be very supportive on a personal level, but not know how to organise people. Yes, I think that's good. I think to give them the positive trait of it like that is great, because we got to balance the positive traits out with the negatives. If he's going to be a poor politician and hopeless and easily manipulated, he's got to have the positives of having the good qualities as well. Almost like a bit of a Ned Stark, right? Where, for anyone that watched Game of Thrones, he was super, honourable and like a caring person with the people he loved, but hopeless at being a politician. Okay, so let's get a few facts in first. Let's set a few things in there, because there's a lot of messy ideas there. So at some point in time, Because we know that they got very, the government got very ambitious and started like setting in stone this currency, but the government at this point in time might have been quite separate from the monarchy, and they might have not had much to do with them, so this is them doing their own thing. I'd say the government became more prominent maybe when we know ever since Trattoria and Dolos built a sort of connection together that they have a lot to do with each other now in the present day. But it might have not been that like at one point. But I'd say they would have, because they come hand in hand. So I'm trying to think of the best point in time when the Walker could have been alive and could have set in stone this law with who is to be king. And it's not like they're setting that in stone just for being king. It's like a general thing. They believe it about just anybody, whatever your position in society is. So that could go for everything. But of course the people take it as, oh, we got to follow that for who's king as well. Rob was unfairly taken from us. Everybody was unfairly taken from us from in that show, that's for sure. I'll put in brackets the Age of Kings. I'm assuming here that, it's not impossible that the Walker could have lived right on the verge of when the monarchy formed. But the options there for it to have been a pretty bad monarchy at first, and then it changed when we saw the flaws. It's up to us where we take in what works best. Hi Stick, how are you doing? It's good to see you. Thank you so much for that, right? Let's have a shout out. How are you doing? Tell us what you was up to. I appreciate you bringing your community over and dropping off that raid. Thank you. How was things? I hope you had a good stream. It's good to meet you all. For those that are just stopping in, if you're curious what we're doing a lot of world building at the moment in our project. We're making a 2D fantasy RPG, and we're at a point in time where we really enjoy building the world we've got so far and fleshing it out a bit more. So we're writing, we're dedicating each stream to a different topic. We've had a magic stream, we've had holiday streams, calendar streams, and now we're on to a government stream. So we've just been rambling and nerding out. That's what we've been doing. And if anyone wants to have a nosy of our game, anyone new here popping in, feel free to look at our website if you'd like to. Making a game for Game Jam. Oh, that sounds cool. Feel free to tell us about it if you want to. It's always fun to see what other creative projects folk are working on. Okay, so we've talked about so much stuff that I need to kind of break it all up now and write it down on this big document before I forget what it is that we've discussed today. It's so easy to ramble on and just talk, and it all just come out messy, and the hard bit is writing it down and getting it all neatly put down. So we can put in Age of First Men or Age of Kings, because it's very possible it could have been the Age of Kings, because that's when the government formed and the world could have been alive to see that it needed change within it. But we could, if we wanted to, we could have made them an older figure that lived well before that, centuries before, and their positive message has just been carried on into the present day and their values. I guess it depends how prominent we want them to be with the monarchy. If we want them to have lived and saw all that and had a say in it all, then it makes sense for them to be born within the age of kings, because then it's going to be easy to build a backstory with them, I guess. But we also got to remember that this message here isn't just about the rulers, it's about every person. But it sort of had an effect and influence on leadership as well. Hi Daniel, how you doing? Welcome to the stream. Hope you're doing good. A Walker legend, who is basically one of the gods of the world, for anyone coming in who's not sure, changed, how should we word this, the structure of how to change the structure of society, and determined that power and status is not should not be something decided by birth or class. Well, it depends how much. Definitely not by birth. Race, if we want to extend it to race, we could, because they are a Walker, which is a beast race, which would definitely fit with them caring about equality, and that beasts should get some sort of fairness in society too, and not just elves and fae. Thank you very much. What is going on here? Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Chub Cheeks, for that sub 35 months. It really is. I super appreciate that support, Chub Cheeks. Let's have some hype in chat. Appreciate that. And Ralph, thank you so much for that follow as well. I super appreciate that. We run a wee community called Indie Game Squad that's open to all game enthusiasts, artists, devs, and we run 2 game jams a year. The theme for this one is the water levels are rising. It runs for 8 days in a half. I think that's so cool. That's super awesome that, you know, game jams and all that, because one thing that's a challenge to me is getting something done fast, because I'm slow and a perfectionist. And I like to slowly craft something, so it's really cool. I know if I had to make a game in 8 days, it would be a big old mess. And I'm making a UI based game where you're trying to get your ship to port before it sinks. You need to operate the steam, radar, horn, fire extinguishers, radio, and of course pet the ship's cat. Oh, that's great. You gotta pet the animals. Glad to hear. See, that's been included. It is important, forgotten. Hi Daniel, and any tips for not giving up on projects? I really love making games, but I find myself more often than not giving up or taking way too long to keep me working on them. Well, I think it's about mindset. Like, taking way too long, I mean, there's no brush, right? Like, how long is too long? That's the question. Is a year too long? Is 3 years too long? Is 5 years too long? Is 10 years too long? It's all about what is your time sort of to do it in, and just ask yourself like why you've got to get it finished in a certain time, because there isn't really a race about it at all, really. I mean, unless you've got a publisher who's forcing you to hurry up, or otherwise they'll not, that's one reason why it'd be a rush. So yeah, it's just about mindset. I have an extremely confident and positive mindset about how I approach my project, and I think it's really about training your mindset to see it in a certain way, because it would be easy to give up otherwise if you were negative about it, I'd say. So if there's anything in particular that's like that bothers you or stresses you out, I guess it's about thinking what that is and challenging it and trying to overcome it the best you can. It's a tough one for me because I don't personally experience the problem of giving up and losing motivation or passion, because it just is there for me, and so I wish I could be more helpful. I wish I could help more and get that mug replacement out of my face. So yeah, I mean, I'm just lucky, I guess, that I'm just super passionate about this, because it's my priority in life, because there's not really anything else I enjoy doing more, really. I really enjoy being creative, but I guess not everyone, it comes naturally to everyone. I'm just strange. I'm a little bit of a geek, I guess. And when I work on my project, I work for about 6 hours non-stop for a week. Then I lose hope, take months off, and I can come back and keep working on it. 6 hours non-stop for a week. I work like 12 hours a day doing this, and that's not like actively making the game. Sometimes that's just watching YouTube videos, reading books, sort of absorbing myself with knowledge as well. But usually what I do every day is related to any part of the game dev process and sort of getting myself more knowledgeable about it, and part of that, a percentage of it, involves making the game. And there's many skill sets and many things involved with this to some degree. If it's not the game dev side of things or the art, it's the writing, or it's the marketing and the promo side, and the social media and the community management and the and just everything. So yeah, it's got to come naturally to you first of all. Like for me, like I work on it a lot, but I've never once been like, oh my god, I work on this so much. Like I just do it. It just happens, and I do that thinking. Like when I stream, for example, I stream about 3 hours each time. What is 3 hours in a stream feels like 20 minutes to me. It goes by that fast. And I guess that's the thing, it's not daunting, it comes naturally, and just, it's as easy as eating chocolate for me. I mean, that's not true, because this isn't easy. Any project like this is hard, I'm not going to deny that, but the passion comes easy and the motivation comes easy is what I'm saying. And I mean, it's just about getting confidence and ridding yourself of any self-doubt. And I wish I had more advice there on how to get rid of that and losing hope, because I've never really lost hope, and it sounds really cocky to say that, but I genuinely haven't. I don't have self-doubt. I used to when I was younger, like when I was like 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. I might have had it a bit more then because I was younger and didn't have probably as much confidence in myself, but that's kind of just gone with time. I guess as I've got a bit older, I'm sort of like, screw any self-doubt. I'm not going to let it hold me back anymore. Life's too short for that. Just do it. Do what you want to do. Hi Tape, how are you doing? I'm rambling on. I wonder if there's anything I can do to make me not give up. I feel I lack willpower. Yeah, I had someone comment on a YouTube video of mine once, out the blue, a complete rando, said, how'd you do this? Your willpower's made out of diamond. Why haven't you given up when you've only got when you've got less than 100 viewers on all of your views on all your videos? And I'm kind of like, well, for a start, you've got the wrong mindset, because it's not about views. It's about genuine enjoyment here. So if you're doing it just to get noticed or for external validation, you will give up. If that's why you're following a creative pursuit. If you're just doing it for, I'm not saying you are, by the way, but I know that person who commented obviously does look for the external validation, because otherwise they wouldn't have mentioned the viewers. But if it's all about people noticing, and you will give up, because that's not going to come very easily. Yeah, that takes a long time, that growth does. And a lot of building over time. It's not something you're going to just get overnight, or even in 1 or 2 years, or even 3 years. Some people can take forever and might never get it even. So you've got to genuinely love it. As soon as something becomes about doing it for others, or getting sort of viewers or noticed, then you've got to question why you're doing it in the first place. It might not be a passion if you're doing it for reasons other than genuine enjoyment. And I guess I just have to say, make sure what you're doing, you genuinely love it, that you literally do love it. Because if you're not getting motivation and you're struggling that much, the question comes to mind of whether it is a genuine love. I mean, we're all human beings, and it's very normal to have off days. I'm no robot. I'm not going to deny sometimes I have a break myself, because we're humans. But if it's long spurts of losing motivation, and you just not really got a love that it's an important priority in your life, then there might not be a passion there deep down. Maybe your love is for something else that you haven't recognised yet. Do you feel that working with more people helps with that? When it comes to motivation, it definitely is helpful to do it with a community and sort of broadcast it to a community and have that sort of journey and dev process. That definitely helps, because it makes you hold yourself accountable, and it's almost like once you start doing that, you got to keep doing it, because you've already started and you've got people who are following what you're doing. But it's definitely not all of it. Like that just helps somewhat, I think. But you still got to have the love in the first place. But as for Van has asked, what have we've been talking about the government, Van. There's been a lot of rambles today, and to be honest, I've got way less written down than I want. What we've talked about on stream has got to all get put down on here now, and that's going to be the challenging part, because I've rambled so much, been so much said, and it's all about just getting it all down into words now, which is the hard bit. But let's just get the easy things in first. So we're sort of basing the law of the government and how it is structured on the beliefs of the Walker legend. That this monarchy that's in power now they're not in because of birth, they're in because they're talented. So that's the key thing here, but by what you achieve. So I'm going to underline that. And we talked about how King Dolos is an artist or a craftsperson, and it's really cool in general to a skilled craftsman artist. So either they paint or sculpt. It's whatever's going to fit in best with the narrative of what it actually is that they do as an art. But basically, what we do know is that they're skilled and very talented. Maybe the world's best craftsman and artist, even. The world's best or most famous, question mark. And reason why I'm thinking probably the world's best or most famous is because why else would they be king? They're king because they are just so good at it that nobody else could be king. So we're sort of going with this just for a bit of background. We're turning the typical trope of a monarchy by birthright on its head and going for the monarchy that is ruled by the skilled, more of a technocracy thing, but not so much where it's skill in science. This is like the arts, the skill of arts. So it's sort of a branch off the technocracy, I guess. That's not to say that the previous kings weren't good at science. I guess it depends how far we want to branch the skills, because it doesn't necessarily mean that we're limiting these here. As long as you've achieved, you're worthy of being king in this world, basically. It doesn't matter if it's art or architecture or sculpting or science or being a genius at something. I think you're eligible as long as you're talented in a certain industry. Doesn't matter what. But for King Dolos, it's art in particular, because we were talking about how the kit and the safe haven has inspired artists in particular, and probably a lot of other industry as well. And it's really cool to parallel the safe haven side of the themes that we talked about last stream in with the present day with King Dolos, and he's been influenced by that. Obviously, there's a lot of people that have probably been influenced by it in the world, but he is a key one, and he's thriving, and he's thriving from his talent, and he's been appointed king because of it. And it's very flawed. I mean, it's very admirable, that kind of government, because you think, yeah, that's fair, giving everyone a shot, right? And not limiting it by birth or social class or race or anything like that. Everyone gets a chance if they're good enough. It's kind of that kind of law. And I think that's a kind of very moral thing. And I could imagine the Walker had really good intentions with that. But unfortunately, it's not perfect, because people who are skilled and talented aren't necessarily good politicians. Oops. So that's why we've got a poor politician there. Now, I think that's King Dolos's flaw. Although he is skilled at his art, he's a terrible politician, and that's unfortunately why Trattoria has been able to work his way in and manipulate him. And it's kind of sad. And I think all Dolos cares about deep down is his art. He probably just spends all day in his room doing art and sculpting or painting or whatever it is he does. And he doesn't care about the politics. So he never really wanted to be king. He just was made king because people just admired him so much. He's so loved by the people that he just was forced into that role. And I think, yeah, and it fits well with what we built, and with this sort of connection, I think it strengthens that, and I think that it works quite well, because it wouldn't have really made sense to have Dolos be anything that was like, making him be a good fighter, for example, would make him a little bit more of an intimidating presence for Traitorio, but I definitely think it works with him being a bit more docile and timid even, because then he's easy prey for Traitorio to take advantage of. He's just a sweet artist. And that's why we says he's probably very good with the people, because he's followed the honour, those virtues of love and kindness and forgiveness and humility and service and loyalty. I'd say that he's following these values to a T, of the Walker. And I'd say that what the Walker's scriptures say are the laws, maybe, and that the government, and not so much the government, but definitely the monarchy, are kind of going this way, but the government are as well. But maybe that it's become a bit more corrupt with them, because this could easily be corrupted, that's for sure, although it's very moral, and I see the good message behind it. It could be abused, because people who follow that law could twist it to something where it's like every man for himself, right? And like very law of the jungle approach, where people are almost ruthless in the way they will do everything they can to succeed, which is how that's probably what some people are doing, and that's why they've invented the currency, and they're doing everything they want to achieve the desires, some people, including Traitorio now. So yeah, like the only problem is there would be a lot of ruthless self-interest with that sort of message, but I definitely don't think it would be the Walkers' intention. They would have just wanted to rid sort of positions of power from any unfairness in regards to equality and class, and people of certain ancestry getting in just because they were born into it, because that is totally unfair. And at the time the Walker was alive, it totally would have made sense that was a problem, and they might have not seen the bigger picture, that having a message like this could also create people motivated by self-interest, which we have to clearly have, because otherwise Traitorio wouldn't exist and be trying to do stuff what he's doing, as well as any other lackeys he's got in the government. So it's all about getting all these little ideas in now. So we'll say, as Met said a bit earlier, let's word that how that was said. We've got a few ideas that chat have suggested as well, so it's all going to be about getting them in. So Met said supportive on a personal level, but not good at organising people. But not good at organising them. Leaves a lot of the work to Traitorio. Like the military, pardon me, the burps I'm getting. Like things like the military and taxes, or any like government jobs, organisation jobs, and punishing criminals and all that kind of thing. Maybe Dolos is too soft for that, so he leaves it to Traitorio and his lackeys. So we'll say such as corrupting the army, punishing criminals, collecting taxes, etc., and anything else that's to do with government stuff, basically. Maybe he was really good at it, but time past he lost his skill. Now all he has is a room full of past accomplishments. Maybe his father was king and he was supposed to be next king. Well, we're not going to have a monarchy that's anything to do with births, because that we're flipping that on the head. So in our world, what we're shaping here, it's going to be completely irrelevant. Like if Dollar say has a son, which we don't know if he has, he might not, he might, we haven't decided that yet, or if he's got a family, but if he did, they wouldn't have any sort of power after him. If Dolos passed away, they would then elect someone else who's got a great skill. So it's kind of flipping the typical standard fantasy trope of the birthright on its head, and we're going for something a bit quirky and unusual, but still flawed in its own way. There's definite on like good intentions behind what the Walker legend states, but it's still flawed, because someone skilled doesn't equal good politician. Could even be taken advantage of and manipulated even. And that's a problem, and that's what's going to be happening in the present day. So as for his skill, what happens to his character arc is another question, and it's definitely open at this point in time what he becomes. But at this point in time, when we know he's definitely very good at what he does, and I'm sure he will himself go on a character arc to some degree eventually when it becomes clear who Traitorio is. Who knows how that's going to affect him, and what's going to happen there. And yeah, but that's definitely true. He wants a simple life filled with art, so we'll say that who desires a simple life filled with art. I think that's a good point, that he lives for his art, and it makes sense. That's how he was able to become so skilled, because he practiced so much, and why he would not really enjoy being in this role. Maybe he enjoyed it at first. Maybe when he was first elected he quite liked the attention, and it was almost like winning an award, but then once he finally got into the role, it sunk in how tough it is to be a politician. And yes. Hi Rav, how are you doing? It's good to see you. So we'll say this here as well. We are flipping the traditional monarchy on its head, instead of it being hereditary. Is that spelt right? I don't know. I'll correct any typos in that afterwards, because it was already 6 o'clock, oh my goodness, and I want to get all the info in before we go. People. So we're sort of inspired by the technocracy rule by the skilled. So people are elected due to talent and skill. From talent and skill. just so folk know of anyone coming in, and it's very much the quote that we've got in bold here is kind of the law that they're going by and why such a structure exists in the first place. They're going by that legend's beliefs. So it gives a sort of religion link to this as well, because you kind of need some kind of law to go by, because otherwise these rulers will be doing whatever they want, right? And they'd be crazy. King Dollars could just do as he pleases, and so could Traitorio, and they sort of have to follow this rule. But the dangerous thing is how they interpret the law, and they might twist it to their own agenda, right? Like, you could get the very self-interest driven, greedy people seeing by what you achieve and be like, yes, and they get sort of kick out of it, because people who are very self-motivated would like that kind of rule, sadly. But that was definitely not what the Walker intended. They just wanted people to have their fair shot in life. That's all it was for. Okay, and let's catch up with chats. On Discord, I linked the message where I linked videos on government. So awesome, Matt. I'll have a look at those after. Thanks for sharing. Collecting taxes and treasury stuff would be a big one, since that means Traitorio is in charge of paying everyone else and can reward loyalty to him in that way. Yeah, for sure. And anything linked with the economy and the raindrops, I feel that Traitorio has got a lot of the control over, because they've kind of established that currency before Traitorio was even born or elected as PM. So they've got that self-driven greed and that in them by nature anyway. Traitorio is just an extension of what they all the messed up values that they already probably stood for. One way that could still be a bit hereditary is that people could use their government power to give their children or other people close to them acts. See, yes, people could totally manipulate the law that way, and that's the interesting thing, because something like this is a very general statement, and people could make it into that what they want to make it in, and before you know it, you've got a terrible government all over again, and the Walkers' intentions were completely ruined, because someone like, it's all just so silly. We can never get the perfect government in reality, can we? That's the truth. But I like that everything seems nice on the surface, for sure, as we go into the game. It's not like your typical dictatorship or anything, because I think Traitorio is going to be a little bit more low-key than that, ironically, looking at his name. That's definitely ironic that he's a bit more low-key and sneaky, but it's definitely going to come to light that he's up to no good, that's for sure, at some point. And it's pretty obvious he's a bit shady from his name alone. And enjoy listening to Scribia Politics. Thanks, Rav, I appreciate it. Hi, Zava. Quick lunch before moving on to more classes. How are you doing? So it's a metro. Oh, really? That one might be on the list. I'm going to have to look, because this is a really cool article, folks. I'm going to put it in chat. There is a part 1 to it as well, so feel free to look at part 1. But this is what's been really a really cool thing for me to follow, looking at all the different types of governments. I mean, in a way, it could even be this, because that's a rule by 2 people, and in a way, it is both Traitorio and Dollars that are ruling. So I'm gonna look at the one you mentioned, Rav, and see that as well, because in a way it's taking a few different types of governments to what we're forming here. I'm all for the world to work this way. Yes, too bad the real world. Would you like it, you guys, if this was how the real government and monarchy was? I mean, it's definitely got good intentions behind it, but you can totally see how it can be abused as well, can't you? Which is, I think, a perfect structure for a fictional world, because to some degree you want the system to be messed up so you can create an interesting story from it. getting a bad feeling here. I know from that name, that's what's so funny, because it's staring him right in the face that he's a big old betrayer and bad guy, but people probably don't even see it. Although I definitely assume there'll be people that dislike him, because a lot of people don't like the government, but they definitely won't know the extent of how awful he is, that's for sure. I like the name though, yeah, it's a good one. Okay, so there was something else that was mentioned. There was a really cool idea that chat had. An art competition held to determine the next leader. That was very silly and quirky, and I liked that because I like Raindrop Chronicles being, you know, a story with a few comic elements thrown in and silliness from time to time. So having some not so serious as a way they're elected is kind of amusing and funny. So something like, as an initial idea, when the next king, queen is elected, an art competition is held to determine the next who it will be. Typos are all over the place. So, you know, the other options are like, you know, have a democratic vote where everyone decides, or only have a few people with power decide, and all that typical standard government stuff that we have in the real world. But I liked the idea of having something a bit quirky and like almost wholesome in a weird way, and a bit nice. And I like the fact art's so respected in this world. It gives a sort of positive, heartwarming side to the game in a bit of a dark setting, because there's definitely going to be dark moments. So something like that, and seeing how valued art is in competitions, because in our world sadly artists get underpaid and they don't get what they deserve. So we're sort of flipping the typical reality on its head and having art be like really whoa, and whoever is a good artist ends up being potentially the next king. So if we do go that route, we are limiting it to art and not just any talent. I did have the thought of, it could be generic, any talent or skill, but that kind of would make it a little bit more specific to art. But art's a broad category, like you can get sculpture or anything in that. It's not necessarily just traditional art, it could be crafts in general. But skills and knowledge instead of ignorance sound way better to me, yeah, for sure. Sadly, King Dolos is a bit of an ignorant one, and makes for an interesting way to gain power in this world, yeah. And it links in, even though episode 1 in Lakefall is a bit further out from the capital, even Nigel's early character arc that we've already built is starting to have parallels to this and bring it to light that this is how the world works, because he's a painter. He's a casual painter himself. Not a very good one though, but he does it as a way to relieve his anxiety. And that's how the Fruits were able to get an easel in the first place, because they stole it from Nigel and bullied him. They stole his easel. He could like have dreams, you know, to be admired and deep down, and people aspire to be creative in this world because they know it would gain them a lot, And yes, he could even talk about King Dolos in dialogue when we meet him when we have chats with Nigel. He could like say King Dolos became king because he's an amazing sculptor or painter or whatever we decide to go with for him. And that way we're mentioning him naturally in dialogue well before we meet him in the game. And Nigel can just like show his admiration and be like, yeah, and then we already know, oh, the king's an artist in this game, interesting. And like just slowly bringing in that world building within the dialogue naturally, I think is a really cool way to do things. Saboteurs tried to run people's art during the oh, that's a really, really cool, very funny create. Well, it isn't funny, it's absolutely tragic. How dare they? But it's a really good story and potential conflict point and something that could happen. I like it. And if a saboteur is caught, then they could be seen as the most horrible person in the world, because who would even think to ruin such masterpieces? I know. That's an interesting one. I'm going to keep that in mind. I'll be looking through the VOD after, and anything I've missed and not added to the list that's been said in stream, I'm going to add as an extra thing here. Wouldn't it be fun by the end of the game, Nigel gets good enough and becomes king? Oh my god. Well, if you go through a branch in the story where he doesn't get killed off, because Nigel himself could have a tragic ending in one of the branches, obviously, because there's a chance that the reptiles or the fruits could populate Lake Full. But if, he's alive in a certain playthrough, that would be a great ending for Nigel. How wholesome. That's so wholesome. Because didn't we say, like, Fiona, she knows she can only have her life of freedom if her brother gets over his anxieties and demons and lets her go, and he will only be able to, him being, in that sort of position, she'd be free to do what she wants then, for sure. Because that's how, that sort of thing, what Van mentions, is how I imagine Raindrop Chronicles in regards to the whole saga here, not just episode 1 alone. Because obviously by the end of episode 1, there's not going to be too much character arc difference, because it's only a small portion of the entire saga. But when I think of the saga as a whole, and the journey that characters can potentially go through and take, I love the idea of world-changing things happening like that, where the NPCs we've met are in different positions and they've found their place in the world, and where they live at the start of the game isn't necessarily where they live at endgame. I like the idea of you as the hero having a sort of say in who has power in the world and who can make a difference, and overthrowing people that you don't agree with and putting people into better positions and situations if you did like them, and shaping the world, not just shaping you and your personality, but shaping the world around you as well. And yeah, it would be a good idea to put little hints of the greater world in early dialogue to help player know more about what's going on out there, for sure. I think that's definitely something I aim to do, and a sort of method to storytelling I personally like, when you filter those little world building details as you play through dialogue naturally when it's relevant. Like Nigel bringing up King Dolos is completely relevant because they share a passion for art and he would aspire to be like Dolos, so he's the perfect character to mention Dolos in early game. And it's already highlighting the king well before we've met them then, so when we finally do meet them we already have a bit of information on them and knowledge, but it wasn't forced upon us in a heavy exposition way. We did it in a way where it all was relevant and neatly flowed, and that's kind of really cool. And would be amusing to give Nigel the throne and have royal wedding to the blacksmith. Yeah, right, that'd be awesome, because we do ship Nigel and and the blacksmith character. I mean, that would be what you'd call an absolute wholesome moment in the game. So when we have like this section at the top where we've put in, where is it? We've got tone here. We've got a mixture of emotions. It's a dramatic adventure, dark, light-hearted, hopeful, grim, realistic, fantastical. I'll even put wholesome in. In fact, we'll move dark here. We'll put the more darker themes last. Realistic and fantastical. See, it's a contradiction because it's both. We're going to follow realistic themes, but we're also going to have fantastical elements as well, of course. I mean, we've got living barrels, so clearly. But then, like, the message behind people's stories and what goes on is very real. And there's going to be a lot of relatable themes. So although Carol's a barrel and the fruits are fruits, and that's totally not real to life, what those characters go through is what I hope to make their arcs relatable, because I think relatable is a good thing. In fact, let's put relatable by realistic. Relatable's a really good thing to aim for with characters, because I think that's how people are able to connect better with characters when they see themselves in them to some degree. Rather than them completely, like, even if it's just a bit, like a tiny bit of that character, something they stand for reminds them of something of them or what they've gone through. Where are we? Oh my gosh, we've got so many pages, we're losing the government section we were writing. No, that's the ages, there we go. Would be so adorable for the hero to attend the wedding in the end of Coronation. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be making a note of that one, because it feels like a very strong end to, like, an end game thing, you know, like, it's well into the future, this development, obviously, but it's really nice to have those end game scenarios in mind, even though they're not going to be there for a long time, because it's those things that make you excited when you can see the bigger picture and what's ahead. That's what makes you excited to make the story and keep building it and crafting it bit by bit. Because King Dollus, I do not imagine him still being the king by end game. Something's going to happen along the way, I'm sure, and either he passes away or decides to step down as king, or there'll probably be at least 2 endings for King Dollus as well, and it would allow a potential new person to be elected by end game after everything's gone down. I mean, who knows, even when I say end game, but King Dollus might find his storylines come to an end by episode 4 or 5. It might not necessarily be episode 6. So it all depends when it falls, but I imagine the government character arc will go into at least end of episode 3 when we get to the swamps, because I imagine there's going to be some revelations in those swamps and truths are going to come out about Traitorio at that point, because the swamp is sort of like their second base and there's going to be sorts of messed up secrets there. So everything could go wrong for Dollus from that point, from all we know. And it might make someone get elected sooner than we think. And one of the fruits, or even Violet, could also get good enough at art. Yeah, so that's even more cool if the player's got options, right? Like, Nigel's just is one option. Nigel with Duncan as his right-hand man. Because some kings and queens will have partners, obviously, and they can rule together in that case. Or, you know, be the queen or king next to them. But so Nigel is one option already, which is great. I'm loving that you guys suggested that, and it's a really cute wholesome ending. But then having more options as well is very appealing for players, because multiple playthroughs and seeing all the different scenarios, and some people like other characters more than others, so it's good to give people options as well. And that's a really that's so cool that you mentioned that about Violet being good at art in the end, potentially, because we've already sort of set in stone that she does this painting in Main Quest 2, and having her sort of role in the story go towards a more painter thing, even if it's just a side thing for Violet, because I know her vampirism and the cure and her self-control, and that's a big part of her art more than ever. But I could totally imagine the painting side of things could be a sort of side plot for Violet, especially because she can't communicate. She's unable to speak or communicate. So sort of becoming a painter to communicate with us could be part of her arc as a way for her to talk to us and get her message across to us. And that's like paralleling again all these little art themes that we're bringing into the game. And I don't think like the art themes in themselves, I think, will come a lot more heavy in episode 2. I don't think episode 1 will be like very heavy with the art. I know that we sort of we're trickling it in bits with Nigel and the fruits and Violet painting, that's for sure. But episode 1 at heart is Roots and Rumours, isn't it? That's what the title is, and all about all about what we've talked about in the story suggested, and all those community bonds and the division with the reptile and the humans, and the twisted propaganda, and the barrels wanting to belong, Carol wanting to belong but not feeling like she does, and all those sort of themes like for episode 1. But episode 2 could go down a more heavy art route with the themes, where it focuses on them even more if we wish, because episode 2 is going to have very different themes to episode 1, and it will have its own subtitle. Who knows what episode 2's subtitle will end up being, which is, if it's Violet, that could be a further reflection of the vampire elf legend. So that's a really cool idea too. We've already got Nigel and Violet as potential choices for future king and queen, so that's great. And because we've mentioned this and we've had all these ideas, it makes me feel really satisfied that we've gone this route with having, like, not going for the typical birth king that most fantasies do, and the fact that we've gone this route, because we're coming up with so much potential cool things now, whereas if we went for just typical king from birth, that's really limiting, right? And we wouldn't have had all these options. And this is why I like streaming this project, guys, especially the world building and story side of things, because you guys I wouldn't have thought of these alone on my own. I mean, not saying it would have been possible for the thought to come into my head at one point, but you guys have brought it up and it's sort of established that idea as something, and I know I'm not going to forget it now because it's so cool, both of them, the Violet and the Nigel one. So it's so valuable to the project to get this community input, because the story's going to just be full of so many cool little touches and details. Saboteurs will probably come out of the woodwork to prevent them as king and queen, and that can be a conflict, right, at some point. I'm sure it wouldn't be easy and everything are perfect. Don't break yourself so long, chat. The world is looking really great, Sabot. Thank you, Cyber, it's really cool for sure, and this is really suitable for me to do at the moment, because these sort of streams are probably going to go on for the next few weeks until my house move. Not necessarily just world building ones, we might have some present day story streams as well in between world building ones, but I'm not sure when the date of the move will be, but it'll either be end of April or early May, so just expect a few things to get a bit, like, slower in regards to the game dev side of things around then. The first playable build will get pushed back to the summer, folks. So, which isn't a surprise. I kind of thought that was going to happen, but there's some really exciting things planned, and then I'm excited to show you though. in the next couple of weeks, maybe around the house moved in regards to the game screenshots and that kind of thing. So that's, we're all very excited too. And the slight delay, I feel like it'll pay off in the long run, because at the end of the day, we're going to contact the press about this for purple build, and the Steam page will be up and all that just slightly before the build is out, probably a couple of months before the build. Probably get the Steam page up maybe late May, if that'd be cool. Next month, get the Steam page up. So I like to get that up a bit sooner than before the demo comes out. And but we want it to be good, right? We want it to look really cool. Okay, and Dollars becomes the official theme park mascot when it reopens and sells fast food from the sandwich factory, becoming Burger King Dollars. Oh my goodness, yes. I think that would be really funny. I think having the theme park rides at the amusement park, once it's like when it's even abandoned at the start, you'd see what the rides look like, because they're all old and unused, and they could kind of be like, like the faces of previous leaders on them and things, and that would really work well with Dollars for sure. And it's almost like making fun of them in a way, and it's like probably all the leaders to some degree weren't the greatest and had their flaws, but they weren't horrible people or dictators or anything. I mean, some of them could have been. The options are open, but I imagine that there's a chance there was a bad leader around the time of the Walker, and that's what inspired change. So for sure, whoever that bad leader was will definitely have a face on the ride, and it won't be complimentary. Right, so yeah, this is really, really cool, guys. So I'm gonna actually bold that bit and put that bit in italics, because that's a quote, so it's more fitting to put in italics. And Xavier said that interesting thing, so I can always add that as extra detail. And I might expand this by putting the ideas for future potential Kings of the Night and Violet thing off stream as well that you guys said. I'm trying to think if there's anything extra that I haven't mentioned before I head off. Other than the fact that the Cloud City, because we know there's another government in the Cloud City, but they're very isolated. They have no say of what goes on in this side of the world, because they just literally just care about their Cloud City. But I imagine that they're a monarchy that is, but like people, it's a birth monarchy, like all about taking over. The son takes after the father, etc., etc. So that one's like your traditional one, whereas this one in the capital isn't anymore. Because Scaly's character sets that in stone, that she got exiled because she was mixing with outsiders and that, so they definitely seem a bit more isolated. Yeah, there's a few little bits I've still got to get in, but I have mentioned all of it on stream. The stuff about Trattoria sort of taking advantage of this and using it for pure self-interest reasons, because he's kind of still going by the law, isn't he? Because he's but just in a selfish way. I mean, King Dollars is still selfish in his own way, because he doesn't really care about ruling the people. He just cares about doing his stuff. But in definitely a slightly more likeable way than Trattoria. Because at least he's not a complete mean person. Yeah, I think I've said all the main things. I'm glad that we've covered that and we've fleshed them out a bit more. I'm not 100% sure we're entirely done with it. I think there's potential to still further discuss this, but I think I'm satisfied by it right now, and whether we go into this deeper when it becomes relevant more, the government, and there's this plot point where we need to discuss this further, then we will. But I'm definitely happy that we've at least set in stone where people are elected from talent and skill. So we can write that in here now. Into positions of power from talent and skill, not born into it. And that's just the present day since the Walker came along and made those laws. It might have not been like that before the Walker. In fact, it makes more sense that it was very different before the Walker, and they were inspired to change it to this. It might have been from birth before then. And the military's a question mark right now. That's one thing that hasn't been really discussed at all. But obviously that's a branch of politics. And I'm sure Traitorio would have a say. In fact, I'm going to say controlled by Traitorio. And I don't think it's relevant at this point in time to flesh that out to a great degree, because there's not like a point in the story where the military are the focus. But we do have a knight character in with the elven guy who's the bit of the Joker with the big grin on his face. He's a knight. So definitely a connection with the military there. And I just imagine so far Traitorio will have a lot of the say in regards to that. Even the diplomat that we hire in Lakefall might have some sort of links to the military as well, being what considering what their role is being a diplomat. But it seems that they could be more of a wandering kind of helper, but from looking at their profile, but I could definitely see them communicating with the government with some issues. Okay, so yeah, we've covered some really cool stuff, guys. So I'm thinking what's coming next, because I like that we're sort of going in, talking about little bits and fleshing out each little bit first. But there'll be opportunity to go into even more depth when necessary. I think one thing that's going to be important next, I mean, there's definitely a lot more to discuss. Like, it's all about what on earth made them decide to, decide raindrops were so useful, although that law was discussed, and we know that they're using it to have like control over their economy and things like that. There could be something more there. And who was the leader at the time when that all happened and all that thing, past important people that started all that, things like that are probably cool to do. Even just fleshing out the age of the first men a bit more if we wish, even though we don't necessarily have to just yet. It could be cool to keep it vague for now. But we do know some details, like the safe haven would have formed when something was going on during this time in a war, which was likely, probably in one of these periods. But then we have, this is very important, the whole Dra and humans point in time, which is closest to the present day, which the war the war was 16 years ago and the conquering was 36 years ago, and we've talked about that a little bit quite briefly, but we never went into it in depth, and it's going to be very important to go into depth with that so that we can really build a good story and some good lore and good dialogue and history with this, so that when we have conversations with the NPCs in Lakefall and in the caves, we've got all this really juicy lore to look at, and that we don't want to go into that story in episode 1 blank with no clue of the history of all this. So I can see us slowly moving into this soon as well, where we discuss the draw in a bit more detail and really what happened, and try and balance both sides, the good and the bad and the flaws with both, and kind of make both sides sympathetic if we can, but make it mysterious and surprising, the twists along the way as well. It is called Roots and Rumours. And it seems like outside the capital there's more reliance on local militias, like people that the Lakefall government hired, yes. So that's probably, the diplomat that is going to be in Lakefall that we can take with us in the caves as one of the branches if we don't go the herbalist route. It's pretty clear that she's, been sort of hired to some degree to help out that little village of people in Lakefall, and yeah, so that makes sense. And I don't think Totalitarian would have much control over Everbloom Forest and Lakefall. I imagine they're quite isolated, but there's still some cause for concern, like their land being slowly turned into farmland and things like that. But that's like little side plots. And the government is a looming threat probably for Lakefall. They wonder maybe how long they'll be able to stay the way they are before something changes, because they're probably quite happy with life as it is, apart from the sentient objects coming to life, of course. But it might be okay for now. And I imagine with sentient objects coming to life, that would kind of stir stuff in the capital once they realise something's going on in Lakefall and Everbloom. The fact that things are coming to life, they might want to investigate at some point. Maybe there's going to be a point when we decide to leave Everbloom and go to the farm and the highlands. So there's going to be a plot point when we as the hero realise we have to move on, and there's another mission ahead. And it's all going to link in, of course, with Carol and finding the barrels to some degree. That's going to be a big motivation to move into the farm and the highlands, but something else could motivate us to move there too, because I imagine each the party that come with us will have their own reasons for why they need to be in the capital or the farm when it comes to episode 2. We don't want any characters just hanging on for no reason, at least even just a tiny reason why they can say why they want to come along with us, just so they don't seem like they're just background characters. Anyway, I'm gonna head off, folks, because it is super late. Wow, I've streamed on late. No surprise, because that's what happens in a Worldbuilding streams. Maybe we can start doing raids again and trivia soon, and once I start to get better with my time and finish stream at a proper time, because my dinner's gonna be ready any minute, I believe. We'll carry on with this again on Thursday, and we might go into talking about the reptiles then. We'll see what springs to mind as an important discussion point, because I would like to slowly go into present day story like writing soon, and we might still have the odd Worldbuilding stream mixed in with that. where we talk about the bigger picture in between. Have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much to Master Emerald. I appreciate hanging out, and for the sub earlier. Thanks everyone for being awesome. Hopefully I share more ideas out. Yeah, you guys have been fantastic with your ideas. I appreciate you. And I'll see you all on Thursday. Thanks for hanging out. All awesome. Bye bye.